Hello, everyone. This is Anthony Metivier from magneticmemorymethod.com. Hashir is here in the chat. Thanks for saying hello, chat. Hashir, hit the thumbs up and let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, how things are going for you. Hashir, how are you? And if you're joining us, make sure you say hello. If you're watching the replay, we're going to talk about this method of a word that people just don't even know how to pronounce. And so that means that it's particularly difficult to use. And so it's either Loci or Loci or Loki, the method of Loci, Loci, Loki. And I've always thought it was Loki because in Latin, usually C is pronounced hard, at least all the Latin that I've seen that I can think of. But in any case, um, it is one of those things where when terminology has so many potential pronunciations, we might want to think about changing it. And so when I talk about the magnetic memory method, I talk about magnetic stations in magnetic memory palaces. But these are very different at the end of the day than loci or loci or locus, whatever. And it's always a method of, or a method of madness and a madness that leads to better methods to think about what we can do with older terminology to get rid of it and improve. And so mind mapping is going to help. Mind mapping is going to help. So I got some mind mapping stuff here. I know that it is appearing weird. I spent a little bit too long trying to figure out how to make it not appear so weird, but the outer space green screen thing here is what it is. Harvinder's here. Hello, Harvinder. Great to see you. And my hand sometimes disappears because, yeah, we're still working out the new spaceship of the Magnetic Memory Method Starship Enterprise for teaching the entire universe. And it's quirky and it's fun, but mind mapping is going to help even with that because a lot of this is happening because of mind maps. And of course, I learned mind mapping from the great Tony Buzan, and the recent mind map mastery is incredible. So if you don't have it, make sure you go out and get it. And Harvinder says that this is one of the best topics to discuss. Great, thanks for that, Harvinder. And let me know more about why you think so in the chat. Type why is this one of your favorite topics to discuss, and do you mean Method of Loci or do you mean mind mapping? And if you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And for some reason, yellow is disappearing on the live stream. Oh, well, we'll make sure not to draw in yellow because today, yellow is invisible ink. Sergio's here. Hello, Sergio. Thanks for being here. The doctor is in the house. By the way, if I drink a lot, it's because I've been talking a lot all day and need to keep the pipes in shape or else I'm going to lose this voice of mine. So Hashir says he's in Pakistan, Karachi. Excellent. He's absolutely fine and shining. Awesome. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. We don't often get to do this time zone, so I'm up later on the machine than you would normally get me. And that's because, well, jump when the mood strikes, right? So Sergio's in the UK. Great. Awesome, awesome. And this is a particularly important topic, not only because Method of Loci confuses so many people because there's so many ways to pronounce it, but also because we can think through, and I can already think through so many ways that people don't even think of using it. And don't even, it's just beautiful. But we now know not to write in yellow because today yellow is in invisible ink. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. Make sure you let me know in the chat there. You can hear. I assume that you can. But make sure you're also saying hello, hitting that thumbs up. Let the robots know that humans are alive and kicking, and that will let us get started. Now, there's a lot to be said about mind mapping and so forth, and I'm going to follow as many of the great rules that Tony Buzan shares in here as possible. But I'm always improving my mind mapping practice, and so should you. And one of the things that I would really recommend is don't be too precious about it, right? Like, look at this. I'm peering off the screen. Ooh, right? And it's just like I could sit here all night trying to figure this out. Every new change I make creates a new problem. Sooner or later, you just got to roll. You got to roll with the operating systems that you got. And I'll just try and move around so I don't disappear off the screen here. and you just do it, right? That's how you get somewhere in life, is you take action. And so method of loci, really, really, I think that term is such a deviation when we could just use magnetic stations instead, but it's what people have heard and they use, so we're going to keep on using it here and there. But at the end of the day, we're directing ourselves at removing confusion, but getting just good enough to roll whenever we can. And so we don't worry about it too much. And those who are so worldly that they're going to, complain and do whatever they do when that happens, well, whatever. We focus on those who are in for fun in the spaceship enterprise of the magnetic memory method. And I also mentioned that too because it's really, really important. Reading a lot of Jordan Peterson lately, so 12 Rules for Life, and also Maps of Meaning here. And these are really, really important books to learn from, and mind mapping can help you a great deal when you map them onto these books, because Peterson basically explains why so many people get stuck in inaction. And getting stuck in inaction is really, really unnecessary. And the reason why it happens, if I understand what Peterson is saying correctly, has everything to do with memory. Because Maps of Meaning, if you haven't read it, is a memory book. It's a memory book in 1,000 ways. And it talks about episodic memory, it talks about nestic memory, and it talks about how that essentially, when we are worrying about the unknown future, we are drawing so many memory resources from our minds that it freezes us in place, and we forget to look at our existing resources in our existing memory to find just how much beautiful, wonderful competence we have right now to get moving into the unknown future. And so we can go into that unknown future equipped with our existing competence if we will just complete some exercises that help us get in touch with what's already there, with the existing mental content in episodic memory and nestic memory. And this is very, very powerful. And mind mapping is a genius tool to help you do it. So, you can mind map your way out of any sort of situation. You've just got to get started and progressively learn the rules to get better and better and better at it. So let's get started. And one of the rules is to have a central image and to use 3 colors in that central image. So now we got to think here. If we're going to unpack all of the many, many ways that we can use the method of Loci, then we're going to need a central image for the method of Loci, and we're going to want to use 3 colors in there, right? So what I was thinking of in our central image would be we would want to maybe have something from the ancient Greek world is what I was thinking, right? Like a Parthenon-esque kind of thing. So Sten is here, Rational Dietetics. Great to see you, Sten. Trippy. Yeah, thank you for that. It is, and it's going to get trippier, so stick around. And if you're just joining us, say hello, hit the thumbs up, let me know where you are in the world. And so I was thinking, something sort of ancient Greek, like columns or whatever. So I'll put just something like this. And these are columns, just to remind us of the method of Loci. Now, as far as I understand, Loki's actually a Latin word. That's not showing up too great, is it? Well, 3 colors. Just imagine that that's purple. And we'll work on making it better next time. And we'll have incremental progress. Speaking of incremental progress, shout out to Alexander, who recommended this book, Requisite Organization. It's really interesting. If you are an entrepreneur, you might want to take a look at it. But let's get our second color in here, which is gray for the columns. And, I'll just juice that in there a little bit, not get too precious about it. This is not Bob Ross speaking here, but a pretty little ancient Greek column structure. Yeah, no, I can't do Bob Ross, sorry. I'll have to work on it. But so that we have a third color in here, let's jam in some green grass, right? Now, why would you do this? Why would you do this? Well, I think that part of the logic here is that you're pausing, you're doing a creative exercise that warms up your creative muscles, and you're letting loose. And we know from creativity studies, I was talking about this on a video the other day, that if you start to tackle activity that requires you to be super creative, you can really fail fast if you're not warmed up. So what you do is you do like a small creative task before the bigger, more demanding creative task, and that opens up the floodgates of the mind, gets all of the positive and negative ions flowing through the synapses so that they're really, really humming at full speed. And so this central image is like one of these little warm-up creative exercises. And as a little tip for you, for those of you who know how to memorize cards, before you hit the language learning memorization stuff, just do a quarter of a deck of cards just to warm up. Like, this is inconsequential, doesn't really matter at the end of the day whether you memorize them all correctly or not, but you're warming up, and then you dive into your 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 vocabulary words, and then cool down with the cards again, right? You're framing things creatively, and it really is explosive. So that's what I think is part of the logic here, with starting with a central image and using three colors. Another aspect of it is that you're getting some critical distance from things. You know, you're not overthinking it. You're just kind of letting your mind wander a little bit in a focused way. It's not totally wandering all over the place, but it's directed at a particular sort of outcome. So it's mind wandering with a destination, so to speak. Perhaps, I don't know. That's been my experience. I don't know exactly what if that's what Tony had in mind with this, but that's what I think. I think it works, and I'm sticking with it. Now, what I do know that Tony has in mind for this, and he talks about it in Mind Map Mastery, is replicating the cell of the brain, or one of the brain cells, on the page, right? And Rational Dietetics says that it makes sense. Great, great, great. Yeah, and you know, sense is often not even necessary, but it does help when it's there. But in any case, reproducing the cell of the brain. So, like a cell has a nucleus in it, some sort of center. It's not necessarily directly in the center, but we're kind of reproducing brain structures on the page while we're using our brain, right? And so we get kind of science becomes art, and then art becomes a scientific process by which we unlock more of the stuff in our minds. So Harvinder says that he loves to use the mind map with the memory palace. Love to know how it works. Great, great, great. So that training is already there for you, Harvinder, in the Magnetic Memory Method program that you have. And here we're actually using mind maps to unpack more ideas about how to use the method of Loci. So we're going to dive into this, or Loci if you prefer. If you're just joining us, let me know where you are in the world. Hit the thumbs up button. Ask any questions you may have as we go along. And yeah, I apologize. This isn't working quite right. Let me see if I move it a bit closer, if it'll show up a bit more. Because right now, it actually looks like an alien has hit the window of our spaceship here, and is not exactly pretty. Because it actually looks quite pretty here. No, actually it doesn't. It looks kind of sloppy. But in order to do this, I have to have this on these boxes, and, well, in any case, it's a column, and that doesn't matter so much. We'll do a better version later, because the live streams are just about us getting together and having a chat and exploring this wonderful medium of classrooms live streamed over the internet. So let's get started. What we're trying to do, our goal is to think of all the different ways we can use the method of Loci, and try to find even more of the different ways that we can use method of Loci, because we're using mind mapping. And so then the next thing that we want to do is we want to think about like how rivers and stuff work, and how the different veins work to spread blood around and so forth. And then we want to come up with new ideas and figure out some different new ideas through this process. So Sergio says that this is used this way because consciousness is not necessarily in the center. Well, that's right. Consciousness is definitely not in the center. And you know what? I think consciousness is probably everywhere, right? Everywhere. Manel is here from Algeria. Thanks for saying hello, Manel. I'm going to see if I can just get this a little bit closer without knocking everything over. Is it live or is it Memorex? Can't edit this stuff out, man. Oh, that's cool. That's a little better. A little bit better. Um, so Manel, how you doing out there in Algeria? I've never been there. One of the things that we want to do is create like these, like if this was a kind of a lake that was gonna send its rich sediment laden ideas out to the ocean of the world, right? Then we'd have to create tributaries or streams and then tributaries and different things out there to release that central idea. So our central idea is how many ways can we use the method of Loki, right? And then we're going to see what happens. So we just think of like one way, right? And one thing we could use really as a way of creating a memory palace from the method of Loki, and that would be like our home, right? So I just like pick blue here, and then I'm gonna at the 12 o'clock point, and I'm gonna use the 12 o'clock point strategically because if you use the major method, so Harvinder, we will actually talk about using the memory palace after all. But if you use the major method, right? Well, 12 then is tin tin for me always. It might be something else for you. And then 1, right, which is 0 1, is the sad tragedy mask for me, right? Because 0 is an S and 2 is an N. And then 2 o'clock is going to be the sun. And I use the sun from Sunshine, the movie Sunshine. And I kind of personify it a little bit. Then 3 o'clock is going to be sandwich. I make a sandwich out of you. Now, if you don't know Euphoria Emporium, then you maybe never saw that episode, but I did. So I use it. You might want to come up with Sam I am, or, something else, some other Sam that you can think of. I know 2 Sams in Brisbane, actually, that I could use. One has a coffee wagon on the bridge, and another is at Burger Project. Hey guys, your guys' name's Sam. You could be 3 o'clock. 4 is Sartre, the French philosopher. 5 is Sal from Dog Day Afternoon. 6 is Sash, right? A Métis sash. If you don't know the Métis, you might not know Métis sashes, but you might know Sasha, somebody named Sasha. You could use that. 7 is Oliver Sacks, of course. And 8 is Shiva. And 9 is Brad Zupp, right? 10 is the Taze. 11, like, don't tase me, bro, kind of tase. And then 11 is Toad, like the Warner Brothers Toad that jumps out and sings songs. And now we're back at 12, right? So it's very, very, very powerful. So Rational Dietetic says, Sam Harris, the neuroscientist. Whoa, where is he? Is he here? Wake up, man. I got to wake up. If Sam Harris is here, I missed him. Sergio says, you do it as 02. Yes, of course. And if you don't know to do that, then just wait until you see what else we unpack in the magnetic Mary Method world, because that's just the beginning of the little optimizations that we got for you. So never leave a digit hanging if you don't have to. That's what I say. And the other thing is you can use singular digits. And if you read Remember It, the latest book from Nelson Dellis, he mentions that. So you can actually use a number image technique, which I have a lot also, when you have a hanging digit that doesn't quite fit the 00 to 99. But I managed to just add zeros from 1 to 9, and then I never really needed to use number image again in that sense when a hanging integer came, because there's 2 things that you could do. You can insert a fantasy. You could use the number image, or you could insert a fantasy 0 on a hanging digit, and it's not a perfect solution, but it's a lot better than humming and hawing and waiting for the perfect solution to fall from the sky, because it probably ain't. So 12 o'clock, home as a memory palace. I think that's where we were going. So now we would either want to draw a house, or we want to use our keyword. And Buzan says that the keyword should be all capitalized. I'm going to just draw a house rather than the word, but we might put in some capitalized words later. So I'll just put a home like that, right? This is not showing up well at all. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm not going to abandon ship now, because we are on the path forward, humming like all engines firing. But a home, that's a way we could use the method of Loki, right? And so the trick is to make sure that that's a well-formed memory palace that really avoids mental confusion, avoids any unnecessary cognitive load, and you just have it as a streamlined structure that you can visit in your mind without crossing your path or leading yourself into dead ends or anything like that. Like, you just want this thing to rock and roll. So there's some procedures for making sure that that happens for you. If you don't have the free Magnetic Memory Method course, please take a moment to register for it now. I'll put it up on the screen and in the chat here, and then you can go and grab it and get registered right now. Who here has not taken that free course? There it is for you. And I'd be curious how many people type in the chat. How many memory palaces have you made? Is it 1? Is it 21? Is it 201? Let me know in the chat how many that you have made. If you listen to my recent interview with Nelson Dellis, we get into our numbers, and I'd be curious what yours are. And speaking of podcast episodes, down in the description, there's a link to the new John Graham interview on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, which he's the 2018 USA Memory Champ. Really fascinating guy, and you'll learn a lot from that episode to help hone your practice. Sergio's got 1. Michael Swain has 195. Wow, Michael, that's incredible. Awesome. Good to see you too, by the way. Thanks for saying hello with that impressive number. So we can use a home as a memory palace. Now, this is beautiful, right? Because now I've done this. I've got it out of my head. And one of the things that you can do also, and I think this has this kind of like percolating effect, is you can, like, I don't know if you call it decorating it, but you can add features to these little river doodads here. And I'm just going to add some circular dots here. Whatever. I'm doing this. I would not normally mind map on a on a painting thing, but you can let new thoughts come out while you're just waiting for them to come, and doodle inside of here and let time go. And why would that matter? Why would that be important? Well, let's think about the pair 2 principle, or Price's law, sometimes called the 80-20 rule, right? Well, your brain is just like, it's not pumping out diamonds, You don't need all this pressure in your brain to somehow create cubic zirconium, right? What you need is to think of your brain as a garden, right? And so you have this soil, and really only about, 10 to 20% of it is ever going to have the tilled areas where you put the seeds, and then over time these plants are going to emerge and grow out, right? And then the actual fruit of the tomatoes, let's say, are going to come out, right? They're only going to occupy about 20% of the space of your mind, but you need the whole 100% going, right? And so people are always like, oh, got to get it now, and they feel under pressure to produce. But that's not how gardens work. Gardens work with percolation based on appropriate organization of mental and energetic space, consciousness, right? And so when we just like pause to fiddly diddly with this and we're thinking about stuff, well, we get more thought out of it because we're tilling the soil, right? And more ideas come, and we just get way more out of the process. So this is partly like putting the brakes on this rather unhelpful need to get it now, and it's helping us be more like the patient farmer, tilling the soil and then reaping the harvest, and we will end up with an abundance of tomatoes, in this case, more than we could ever eat, and then we'll just be perfectly prepared to send them out into the world. Endless ideas, more ideas than you would ever need, and then you just become so much more connected with the world as a result. But you've got to allow for this space. And a lot of people, they think of like redundancy in life. They're just like, oh my God, this video didn't give me my answer in 2 seconds. I'm out of here, right? This is like the death of knowledge. Knowledge needs space. It needs percolation. It needs the soil. And so this is what mind mapping is so great about. It's this giant field in which you plant and you reap the fruits. But you need to think of it like a farmer, and you need to think about that 80-20 rule and how that there's this blank space is where everything's happening. That's where everything is happening. So really, really, really important to think about that. So when I was thinking about this home then, I often think about, well, my home, right? So we could just put little mini me here. That's a stick man in case you can't see it. But then we could also put friends. So I'll just put the word friends. Now, look, this is how beautiful it works. Just as I was writing out the word friends, I heard the theme song from the Friends TV show. So then it's just like um, the characters whose homes I know from TV and movies. So TV and movies gets to go on here. So there's that, right? And then you have family, and it becomes recursive because now you can think about, well, I know the TV shows that I liked, but what are some of the TV shows that some of my other friends liked, you know, or my other family members liked, and then you can just start off a whole tributary from here that would list out a bunch of TV shows from there. Or now you can start a new one, right? And then have TV programs, or I would have TV programs and then movies that are appropriate for memory palaces to really flesh out and extend what we can do with the method of Loci. So let's check in with the chat. Nicholas says, greetings. Sorry for disturbing, but which book about mind mapping do you recommend? My number one recommendation at the moment is Mind Map Mastery by Tony Buzan, and also I think it's called 101 Tips for Better Mind Mapping by Phil Chambers. And it is an absolutely incredible book. But I would read this and then the Phil Chambers thing, or vice versa. I don't know. There's no perfect path, but really, really great. They're both great thinkers of mind mapping, and wow, two together, especially if you can get them in the room at the same time together, which I was very honored to be able to do, and then spend the weekend with them. Wow, the things that will come out of that for you is amazing. So take the opportunity if you can. Seek it out actively. So I hadn't even thought of talking about TV and movie possibilities for mind mapping, or sorry, for Method of Loci. So now we can add on here, boom, movies. So I'll make them different, right? So, oh man, but there's another one. There's also movie theaters, right? So there's the actual use of movies that you've seen. And we'll think of some titles here in a minute. Like Clockwork Orange has some pretty obvious mise en scène that we can use. But then there's movie theaters. So man, like it's already the ocean is flowing, and it's just it starts to you need like 55 mind maps just to get out of one here because it's already happening. So now we're at 1 o'clock. We can decorate this a little bit. So we said, let's just start with movies. All right. And now we have theaters. Oh my goodness. So the Uptown Cinema in Toronto, this is where I saw The Matrix and I saw Existence and countless other movies, but I really remember those as being really outstanding experiences. The Varsity was behind that. So, I could fill this out with endless sort of movie theaters, especially in Toronto, because Toronto was where I did my PhD in film studies. I did it in humanities, but I did a lot of film studies after the coursework was done. And I did it also during my first MA. I did a lot of film studies. So, and I worked at the legendary Queen Video. So there's another one, right? So we can add video stores if you're of an age when video stores actually existed, which apparently they don't anymore. I've been told. I saw a broken down Blockbuster sign at some point. But so we got theaters, we have video stores, and you might be of the age where video stores are not so evident in your life, but video game stores are. So you could list those video game stores as potential memory palaces. And so we got theaters, video stores, and then mise en scène, I'll call it, because I like that word, which essentially means the scenes or sets of movies. There we go. Mise en scène. And so now Clockwork Orange came to mind. That has some obvious ones. Star Trek, like the bridge of the Enterprise is pretty clear in the mind. It can make a simple memory palace out of that. And the Lord of the Rings is a pretty vast sort of universe. But if you just think of, I don't know, some of the homes of the hobbits, there's options there. Um, yeah, just let your mind wander, and maybe you start a new mind map. You start a new mind map just about movies that have appropriate mise en scène for the use of the method of Loci as a memory palace. Then what you could do is think also about like which of those movies you saw where, right? And then start to extend from where you saw that. And then you could think about all the different places that you may have seen a single movie. So there's at least 3 different places I've seen Terminator 2, for example, right? And then you could think of like all the Terminator sequels. And I remember seeing the most recent Terminator movie in London, of all places, right? And that was quite a movie theater. So you just wind up with this abundance of stuff just coming out, and this can help unlock it. So we also said TV. We're going to distinguish TV. And so, like, even if like I just think of Stranger Things all of a sudden. Stranger Things, there's maybe just like 2 places coming to mind, but then you got season 1, you got season 2. You keep digging into it, you get more. Breaking Bad is an obvious one, for sure, because you've got the Walter White house, you've got Jesse's place, you've got Better Call Saul's office, and so forth. I'm just going to put a TV set here. I don't know if people even watch TV series on TV anymore, but just put a TV there. And, from here, just go out and start to think of things like Breaking Bad and so on. So we've got a lot of stuff here working for us to generate lots and lots of ideas. And we're just getting started, right? Because now, movies, movie theaters. Wow, great. So, by the way, if you're just joining us, let me know where you are in the world. Hit the thumbs up. And we don't do this time very often. So, really looking forward to meeting some new people that we don't normally have a chance to see. And Parth says, good job, dude. Nicholas says, thank you very much. Sergio gives that thumbs up. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So let me know if you have questions about anything, and we'll keep rocking. What else? Well, who here has ever gone to school? Let me know in the chat if you've gone to a school, because schools are another one. Now, schools are also buildings, and well, let's think about all the potential things that we might think about with schools, because there's some recursion here, right? We can go backwards through the arms. Now we're at 4 o'clock. Anybody remember my 4 o'clock? That's the philosopher Sartre, the French philosopher, 04. So that's hard to get. Yeah, that's not showing up too bad. Anyway, you can spend some time decorating here and so forth. But now we have schools. So, schools. Now, you've got stages of life, seasons of life. So you got, like in my place, we had preschool, we had elementary school, we had high school, then we had Bible school, and then we had university, right? And so can list all of those things out here. By recursion, we can also think about all the schools that are in series. So I was thinking about Walter White's place, and I was thinking about Better Call Saul's office, and I was thinking about Jesse's place, but I didn't think about the school where Walter White used to teach. So now we can think about Walter White's school and add it to our list there of what we already said, right? Amazing. And then you could think of some of the other things. Like I mentioned Clockwork Orange before, and thinking, did he go to school there or not? And there is kind of a classroom scene in Clockwork Orange. So we can recurse, we can go backwards, and then we can think about where our parents used to go to school. And that brings to mind where my dad took me to the monastery where he was raised up in Quebec, right? It's not technically a school, but it comes to mind. And so you can do that as well. The point is to to go backwards through what it is that you did in an exercise like this when you do it yourself, mind mapping all the potential things you could use for the method of Loci, and then away you go. So, and as you go, you can like start to encode in your memory what this is going to be because you're numbering the arms on your uh, mind map, right? Isn't that great? It's really, really great. So the uh, the idea that I like to follow, that I've just sort of bolted on here, and I talk about in greater detail in the link below on the review of Mind Map Mastery. Woo, it's hot in here. These lights that you got to have on are amazing, amazingly hot. Um, you can go and check that out, and you'll see how to bolt on the major method in greater detail because it's very, very powerful. And that's also a great thing to go through for a full review of that book. And then you should go and get that book because you're going to find it very, very powerful. So, well, what else? Well, we can do churches, right? Churches great make for great memory palaces, and they're all over the place, right? So, um, I'll just put a big cross for churches like that. I'm not the greatest artist, but a cross, that's not a great cross at all. But in any case, put a cross to represent churches, and then there would be, the churches where my family went. Then there'd be the churches that I visited in Europe that really stand out in my mind. And then, well, they're not churches, but there are certain mosques that I saw in Cairo, for example. Um, so, you can really, really dive deep into the whole concept of churches. And it may be like with movies and movie theaters and so forth. You might want to, after you're done this mind map out some other ones, right? That you could extend. And then we can recurse, right? Because Clockwork Orange again, there is a church scene in there. Now it's a prison church or a prison chapel, but we can go back. And I can't think of Walter White having been in a church, but because it's a gangster movie, then I start to think about other gangster scenes that have churches, and something hasn't bubbled up yet, but I think it's coming. Is Scarface ever in a church in a scene? Yeah, he gets married at some point there, doesn't he? And doesn't The Godfather start at a wedding? I mean, I don't necessarily know, but we get to play with ideas. And by the way, this is all very, very good brain exercise to be thinking this way, rummaging around in the mental contents of what is already in your mind. And this is where Maps of Meaning that I mentioned before is so profound in its lessons about working with your episodic memory. Because if you just keep revisiting your episodic memory and mining it for all it's worth and letting mind mapping help you do the mining, you'll realize that you have this vast intelligence inside of you that never drained. It's never completely drained. You just keep going back and back and back. And every moment that you live, you're filling your episodic memory with more competence, more tools to use. So it's very, very powerful. And wow, like it's just amazing. So what else could we use for mind maps or for the method of Loci? Well, we can use libraries, but libraries just came to mind, but I might put them as a subset of schools there, right? So, or maybe I make it its own thing, but for now, I'm just going to put them in there as libraries. Great. And I'm not getting too precious about this because, here's the thing. You can always make a second version of your working mind map. Very, very good practice to do. Very powerful. So libraries. And thinking about libraries, so if you were to know anything about the Dewey Decimal System, for example, then you could actually use the major to map out the library better if it's the Dewey. If it's the imperial system in the library, which at least most of the university libraries that I've seen have, then you've got a letter system that still has a numerical component. But in any case, you could use the Dewey to create a more intelligent and perhaps more responsive memory palace out of the library. Does that make sense? So Dewey versus Imperial. So one of the things where I just kind of I have these mind mapping habits that are kind of not as grand as that are instructed in this book. Is that I start doing note taking inside of my mind maps. I'm trying to break that habit and just start new mind maps, but gradual progress, my friends. So we got that. Now, libraries, okay, movie theaters, we got schools. What about things that move, right? Like vehicles, automobiles. Um, so now we pop in another one here. And so we're at 6 o'clock here, I think. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's right. And so now we got vehicles. So to represent vehicles, we'll make like a little car. Of course, it doesn't just have to be a car, it can be a train, a plane, a boat. Um, are there any other vehicles than that? I don't know. A tank, if you've ever been in a tank, and there certainly are some tanks in parks around the world, in different places that you could visit, and so on. So vehicles are great for using the method of Loci. They're often very compact, which can be powerful. It just depends on the nature of the information that you're going to put in there. And So we mentioned video games earlier, but we could actually have a whole thread just about video games if we wanted. Um, then, oh yeah, thinking about schools and stuff, we mentioned these other people and so forth, but we can also think of those people as method of Loci. So you can use human beings for the method of Loci, and that is a very wonderful practice indeed, because both Adolfo, who's not here now, and Christian Fitzharris have been doing this. And Christian in our mastermind group shared an incredible thing that he's memorizing using his body. But when we think about bodies, we have so many options. So we have the body. That's why I'm using pink here. So we have, again, friends, but we also have ourselves. Oh, and by the way, last month's mastermind video in the Magnetic Memory Method Mastermind was all about using the body as memory palaces. Really powerful. But we also have actors, and we also introduced in there the Russian doll technique, which Adolfo says to me he's loving. He's been acing his tests with that technique. Actors, Batman you could use. So we'll just use Batman as a stand-in for. Oh, by the way, rest in peace, Stan Lee. I know you didn't create Batman, but probably Batman wouldn't have had so much success without you. And it's really weird. I was reading some crazy PC articles, sort of crapping on Stan Lee after he's dead. Didn't even have the wherewithal or the guts to say it to his face. Wait until he dies and start pulling out the criticism. But rest in peace, Stan Lee. Wow, so many amazing figures we can use from the Marvel universe as mapped onto the method of Loci for the body. Really, really, really powerful to think of it that way. Oh man, sweating here under all these lights. It's summer in Australia. I don't know. We're gonna have to do the live streams out on the balcony again. It's way too hot in here. Way too hot. What is the temperature like where you're at? Let me know where you are in the world if you haven't said hello yet. And if you have said hello, is it as hot there as it is here? Woo! I'm gonna have to start wearing a ponytail, which I don't like. Anyway, think about the body for the method of Loci. Absolutely wonderful, wonderful approach, a wonderful technique. Um, and here's like a little next level kind of thing. But let's say you were going to use yourself. Think of yourself at different ages, right? So you could use your 3-year-old self, you could use your 10-year-old self, you could use any number of other versions of yourself, right? So I'm just going to factor on a little age element here. And that will be very interesting to think about. What else? So we mentioned libraries and homes and schools. Well, inside of those homes and libraries and schools are very, very special devices that are known as bookshelves. So bookshelves. can be used very nicely for the method of Loci. And if you are really, really, really good at these skills, you can actually use the page numbers themselves. So just as a quick example, where is it? I'm reading this book here by Gary Weber called Happiness Beyond Thought. And I do happen to have a bookmark here. And that bookmark is on page 19. But I was memorizing from the Upadesa Saram, it's called. And I just memorized that it's on page 75 where the introduction starts. And that's just simple. So there it is, Upadesa Saram. And it's a simple thing of just like making an image using your 00 to 99 to remember where certain things are inside of books, right? And so when you want to just like a quick reference to where it starts, instead of like folding the page over, which to be fair, sometimes I just do fold page things over or whatever, and sometimes I do use bookmarks. You don't always have to use these techniques. It's just like use them when they're useful, right? So 75, I just wanted to remember that because I am actively memorizing now the Upadesa Saram, and I just want to see the opening commentary. And for testing, when I was remembering just the word itself, Upadesa Saram, which means essential teaching or the essence of teaching, I just wanted to like quickly find it, and then I just page one over and look at the first couple of lines, and I've only memorized a couple so far because I'm not quite done the Ribhu Gita. But anyway, it's just like a quick practical example of just knowing where things are in books. It's really cool as a kind of neat thing to do for knowledge acquisition, and it also just makes the rest of the book more memorable. And it's also a great brain exercise, and it is just a cool, fun thing to do. And so, great way to get more familiar with a 00 to 99 based on the major also. So Tea Time says, here in Perth, got to about 37 degrees. So you're also in Australia. Great. Thanks for saying hello. And yeah, 37. Wow. Well, here it's just exaggerated with all these lights on. It's actually been very nice today. I spent most of the day on the porch. I'm writing a new book right now, actually, and delighting in the process of writing it. It's one of those things where I try to get out. Well, I don't try, but that's just a catchphrase in English. But I get out about 2,000 words a day, but often I'm able to double that. And so the first draft should be done in about 5 weeks or so, and maybe even sooner. That's the first draft. Then you got to go into development and all that jazz. But when it's hot, then the days just seem to sap more of your energy than when it's not hot. But by the same token, I love it very much. It's just super hot in this room with these lights on. So I think the summer of live streaming from the porch is about to begin. What do you guys think? Do you like the porch live streams better or the outer space live streams? I think these are more for the winter time, but let me know in the chat what you think, and we'll see. The wisdom of the crowd. All right, so let's see if we can jam out a couple more ideas. So just thinking recursively back to schools, well, there's something inside of schools that can be pretty useful as well, which are desks. So I think that, to redo this mind map and get even more ideas out of it, I might just take this bookshelf idea that I just had and change it to furniture. So on the new one, we would just have furniture, and then we could add something else that schools have, which are desks, right? And so what I would do is instead of trying to use every single desk in a classroom, I would just maybe have 4. So we got the 4 corners, and then we have 4 desks inside the room, or maybe just the teacher's desk and my desk, and not worry about all the other desks, because that can create more cognitive load than it's worth. Really depends on your level of skill, your practice, and the nature of the information that you're looking for, looking to integrate into your memory palaces. Okay, so another thing that comes to mind here, speaking of desks, is when you're sitting, sometimes it's fun to take a break and play a guitar. So a guitar is neat because it has, that's the most horrible looking guitar I've ever seen. But guitars are neat because guitars have frets, and every single fret can be assigned a number from the major method. And so a guitar becomes a memory palace. Isn't that beautiful? So, depending on how many frets your guitar has and whether you play guitar or bass, you can calculate a massive amount of space. Now, why would you do that? Well, how about for learning the notes? Learn the notes using the major, um, and then memorize scales and chords, positions, and so forth. Um, Really powerful. So that's a great idea there. And you could also use, once you know chords, you could just use a letter, an alphabet figure way of helping yourself remember chords. So if something was like GAD or something like that, right? Chord progression, you could see Gordon, uh, who was on Sesame Street when I was a kid, and you could see Al Pacino and Dracula, right? And then that would help you remember the chords. And you could actually place them around the memory palace and have them interact with your mnemonics for memorizing lyrics, right? To get out all that music, jam it out in your mind, and then be able to learn the song faster because it's been committed to long-term memory that way. So bang presto, away we go. Uh, we can also do playing cards as Method of Loci, right? So playing cards can be Method of Loci. Now, that may have very, very limited use, but you can do it. And it's worth thinking about. So we could put on here playing cards. We'll just put a little box to represent that for now. But that's another idea. And that's something that has some uses that we can talk about in deeper levels at different times. But yeah, the alphabet itself can be a series of Loci. And this is where we would want to maybe divide the practical location based method of Loci from the inner mind conceptual Loci. So the alphabet, can just be something that you use in your mind without necessarily having an external spatial assignment for information. And numbers can be that way as well. So when we think about the page 75 in Happiness Beyond Thought approach, for example, is it the book that's the memory palace? Or is it the major method fusing with the book that has created a magnetic station in the memory palace? It's not really that clear, but it's not one or the other. It's kind of a fusion of both, which is a general principle. But you could potentially do things numerically without stations. So if you were listening to details with people talking, you could say, well, that's the first point they made. And so for me, that's the tragedy mass 01. And just abstractly weave it together as if 01 was a spaceless or placeless location. You could do that. You could work at it. It would be good brain exercise to do so. Or you could just assign the point that someone made to a letter of the alphabet. So they'd be talking, and you'd say that's point A, right? And you could create magnetic imagery for it and associate it with an apple because it was point A, and not just any apple, of course, like the apple that supposedly Goethe had in his desk, or the apple from the Mac products, right? Or Apple products, better said, like some kind of actual apple. Abstract apple doesn't work nearly as well as an apple that is either understood and known to you through some historical process or story, or that you have actually seen, like the apple on the back of your laptop if you have Mac products. So those are practical considerations when you're using this. And then there's the problem, right? Or there's the solution, better said, is that when you're doing this conceptually that way, right, you're still using space. Because when I use the Goethe's apple, in his desk, right? Or maybe I'm using the apple that Alan Turing was supposedly had the stuff of legend says that Alan Turing ate a poisoned apple. Or if I use my laptop apple, which may or may not be the origin of why there's a bite out of the apple on the back of Mac products, well, those things are all still somewhere in space. They're either in Goethe's desk, or they're in wherever I imagine Alan Turing to have been, or they're on the back of a laptop. So there's really no getting around the fact that mnemonics are always located in space somewhere. Even when I use John Cale for 75, there's this sort of ghostly sense of him being somewhere, right? And so this is the beauty of getting deeper and deeper into the method of Loci, is you begin to realize that it is that all magnetic imagery, all mental imagery is somewhere in space. And if you start to meditate upon that, if you start to think about it, if you start to allow that spatial element to be a power, then every image you have is you're going to be pushed. You're going to push yourself to make it more physical, to make it more real, to make it something more concrete. And you're going to avoid abstractions that make it hard to remember anyway, because a lot of people make their imagery in an abstract way and then they can't remember it later, and it's because it wasn't in their brain already. And that's the magic here. All this stuff that we unpacked here, we always got to say, is it in my brain already? If it's in my brain already, how exactly is it in my brain already? And some of those examples are, I'm just thinking, is it really Goethe that was said to have the apple in his desk? How did that get there, right? And then what's the mental contents around that? And then the Alan Turing thing, right? You start to poke around and start to think, and then you find that some things have greater concrete relationships than others, right? And then you find more imagery. And all of these ideas are just coming from mind mapping. And so one of the things to really, really consider is how you can add more mind mapping to your practice, and then do something where you have like a clock-like structure, and then each thing has a number, so that you'll remember what you mind mapped better without relying on the mind map to be the memory device, because now the mind map is Method of Loci. It is a memory palace. They fuse together as one. This is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Well, I'm going to continue to study it as a beautiful thing and keep reading this book. But briefly on the alphabet thing before I neglect to do it, when we think about abstract things like, or experiments you can run to see how it works for you and so forth, and all of this stuff is acronyms, right? They use the alphabet to make things more memorable, and every single letter in an acronym is in space. It's either to the left or the right, or at the beginning or at the end, right? It's in space. So when we talk about the DOC in the magnetic memory method, doing is the origin of courage. It's the origin of creativity. It's the origin of consistency, right? Well, that D is to the left of O, and O is to the left of C. It's in space. It's in space. And we need it to be in the space that it is, because otherwise we can't say doing is the origin of clarity, right? We need it to be in space. So this is really, really important to understand. And I think you'll benefit from it a great deal if you start to think about just how everything is in space. And it's really, really powerful to do. And the same thing really relates to acrostics and so on. But we are going to have a much greater practice when we really meditate and concentrate on space. And Megaston topos serpentagar kori, as Thales said. Space is ultimate because it contains all things, and that we should meditate upon. Should meditate upon it very, very deeply. And yeah, I think that's what I had to say today. And I hope that you found this as weird as it looks, and as messy as it looks, and like bad jailhouse tattoos as it looks, that you get some ideas here for your own practice and you generate more memory palaces, because I'm confident that every single person has far more memory palaces than they even imagine is possible, and still they start to do this, and they do it again and again and again and keep going back to the well. And we talked about schools, we talked about preschool, we talked about elementary school. We talked about high school and all that sort of stuff. Well, every single one of these has the ages of life. Every single one has the ages of life. You could think about everything. You could think about, like, oh man, I think of Peter Pan when I was a kid, right? Because I think of the movies that I went to, the movie theaters, and the movies I saw when I was a kid. This is really, really a great way of getting more out of that concept. Stages of life. What was it when I was a teenager? Then I think of Scrooge. Do you remember that movie as a teenager? And then I think, well, what about the university movies that I remember going to see at the theaters? And there's many, but you could start to think, well, okay, there's just this sludge, this massive sludge of movies, potential movies in university. I started university I started at York in 1998, and I'd already been to university for 2 years, and then I went to York and I graduated with a PhD in 2009. So I saw a lot of movies in that period. Plus, I also lived in New York, and I did a second MA in Switzerland, and I saw lots of movies there when I was doing the second MA. So that's just a vast amount of time. So how do I start? Well, and I think, okay, let's just pick a place, 1998, for example. What would I have seen potentially that year, landed in Toronto as I did at that time to go to York University? And then I think of a part of the library I hadn't even thought of before, which is the part of the library where you get the movies and you get to watch them. And now I'm thinking of Blow Up, right? And so that movie has some memory palaces that I haven't thought of using before ever. So I'm just doing this to demonstrate for you through my own practice what you not only can do, but you should do if you want to get more out of this beautiful art and tradition. Because there's so much that's so right at your fingertips if you just sit down and run with this and let a mind map help you unlock it. And we can go on and on and on for ever and ever and ever, and it would probably never get tapped out. And I'm still astonished at how many memory palaces I still come up with day in and day out, like all the time. It just never ends. And the beautiful thing is that the future is still there with so many more to come. So when people ask, oh, well, doesn't your brain get tapped out? Doesn't your brain, somehow be like a sponge and it's going to get so saturated that you can't stick any more stuff in? No. No, it's not. It can't. It won't. It's just not possible. The brain is different than that. It's not a sponge. Because you can never possibly have too many hotels, for example, in your vacation life, that, oh, can't enter this hotel because we're not going to remember it. No, the brain doesn't work that way. The brain is going to remember it, and then you can actively make a memory palace out of it, and you can actively use that memory palace so that it fuses with you at a deeper level. And then when you go back, you think, well, what else was around there? And then you find more memory palaces. And even I'm thinking now of like Cairo, which I mentioned earlier, and I didn't stay in a hotel there because I stayed with the great Ollie Richards of iwillteachyoualanguage.com. And then I just thought, but we did go to a hotel. So, just thinking about this stuff creates more ideas and more ideas. And so, that's why you also want to make use of the chat while you're here, because it can just the action will help you create more ideas. So Psycho Mistro says, good stuff. Use the memory palaces. Yes, use the memory palaces. It's the same thing. I'm writing this book now, and I'll tell you, it's not necessarily 100% easy to sit down and write a book, no matter how well versed you are in things. But I reminded myself of something that I myself taught, and I know very, very well, which is that there's no such thing as writer's block, because writing is not a mental activity first. Writing is a mental activity second. It is a physical activity. So you never, ever need to have any ideas to write. You do not need ideas to write. And I'll tell you why. If you can't think of what to write, just write your own name. Write your own name again and again and again and again until you get so bored with it that something else comes. Ideally, the thing that you should be writing about. The other thing that you can do is you could take something that you've written before and start to retype it, right? And that might sound like the most boring thing in the world, but what it'll prove to you is that writing is not about ideas. It is about movement. It is about movement. And the great Gary Halbert said that movement is more important than meditation. And one of the things that you'll learn if you ever become a meditator is that meditation is movement, right? You sit, or you can meditate by sitting and sit just to sit, but you're in movement. You're in the movement of breathing. You're in the movement of adjusting your stillness, so to speak, and all of your chemicals are moving inside of you, and you become so attuned to movement. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and you unlock so much stuff by understanding movement. So it's the same thing with generating ideas. So many people, they get into the memory sort of stuff, and they think it has to be all done in their head without movement, but it doesn't. And so many great things are done by just simply having a memory journal with you at all times for drawing your memory palaces, testing the contents, and so on. So when I'm memorizing, like Upadesa Saram, and I get a new line, then one of the things I do is I just write it out. I don't go and look at the record. I write it out in my own handwriting. And I go, okay, so kartu rajniya parapayute phalam karma kimparam karma tajajadam. And I write it all out. And then I go and see, did that work, right? And then if it didn't, I just correct it. It's that easy. Psycho Mister says, that's a nice bit of revelation there, writing being mental first, but I find that one of the best things to do for the mind is to move the body. Yeah, exactly. Well, writing is not mental first. Writing is physical first, and it's mental second. Woo, look at all that sweat. I shouldn't have had hot water here. But yeah, like move the body. And that's one of the things that took my meditations to the next level, was doing more stretching before that I meditate, and doing more walking meditation, and doing my Sanskrit recitations while walking. Really, really powerful. Really, really powerful. And, another thing too is if you're using your home as a memory palace, one of the things to do is just use the method of Loci to walk from place to place, and actually stand there and say, what was happening here, right? And recreate it with your body, and you'll trigger it. So there's no way that this can fail if you just keep working on it. All right, so Nads is here from Sweden. Been trying to catch you for a long time. I have so many questions. Nads, bring them out, because we pretty much have what we wanted to say here today. So hop to it. Send me your questions. I really appreciate that you've been trying to catch me live for a long time. Thank you for that. Now's the chance. If you're here live, make opportunity of make the best of the opportunity by pumping in your chat. If you haven't said hello yet, say hello. Hit the thumbs up if you haven't said. Hit the thumbs up, and we'll do a little bit of mailbag here while we're waiting for Nads to jam in what he's got, and see what we have here. All right, so where's my mailbag? So questions. So many questions, really, I have to say, they come down to what did you do to answer the question yourself? Because this is a activity that's learned by doing primarily, and you'll answer so many of the questions just by doing. But one of the things that people ask, like, here's one about making the process fun. Okay, so I don't know how to make the process fun. That's a big one. And the reality is that if you don't know how to make it fun, then think about the information, right? Why are you memorizing the information? And does it have to be fun? Does it have to be fun? Because the reality is that not everything in life is going to be fun, right? It's not going to be fun necessarily. So does it have to be fun? Like, what is the bad thing about something not being fun? What's so terrible about this, right? And then think about time, right? think about exactly how long will it not be fun. And then usually if you ask yourself some memories about like when something wasn't fun but became fun once you knew how to do it, then you'll start to think, oh, yeah, right. Like, I go to the gym and it's usually not fun the first 2 minutes, but after I do 10 push ups, all of a sudden I'm totally psycho about all the stuff and I'm lifting this weight and I'm doing that chin up. And, you just are overtaken by enthusiasm once you get the ball rolling, right? Because, you know, I go to the gym usually 3 times a week, and there's a lot of times when fun is the last the last of my concerns because it's like this is discipline. This is the gym. We go there to take care of the machine, to take care of the unit, to make sure the body has a fighting chance to operate, and the brain as well, because the brain is the body. And I don't worry. I don't get hung up on the fun. I focus on the mission, right? And before you know it, I'm having a ton of fun. By the way, here's an additional kind of like memory exercise for you. Uh, the gym recently got revised, and they added this community music center. And I realized that now I can select the music. So there's all this like that plays automatically because somehow the algorithm is tuned for absolute, a style of music that I don't normally listen to. So I go in and I'm just like Metallica and all this like stuff, and I always choose like the longest Metallica songs I can think of and so forth. And jugga 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 jugga, and it's so much fun. But in any case, I was thinking, you can get irritated when someone else goes and selects some music you don't like, and then I thought instead of getting irritated, and this speaks to making things fun, instead of getting irritated, I just say I'll memorize that song that they chose. I'll have some brain exercise here and just memorize the damn song. And the weird thing is that you start to like the stuff better because you've just changed your association with it. And Wayne Dyer always used to say, when you change the way you think about things, the things you think about change. And this is a very, very true example of it. So, does it have to be fun? Is that absolutely critical? And what can you do inside to just get yourself started by remembering other things that became fun once that you got into them or once you learned how to do them? And then what happens if you just memorize stuff and change your relationship with it? And then it becomes more part of you, becomes very, very integral to you. It becomes part of your being, and it literally becomes part of your being, because when we memorize, we are changing the chemical structures of our brains. And it is a chemical change. It's a chemical change that never changes back. And it changes again when we recall the information. It's beautiful. And in case you don't know what like chemical change really means and the permanence of it, chemical change is like when you turn bread into toast. It's not going back to toast, right? And the more you learn to do this, the more you put information into your mind, and you permanently continue to change your brain structure by using these techniques, the more blissful you feel, really, because you feel so connected with knowledge. And of course you feel connected with knowledge because the more knowledge you have, the more it's in your brain chemistry. It's in the stuff that you are made of, and it's part of you. And so you are the person of the knowledge that you have. And we really are what we know, right? We are what we can remember. And our quality as a person is the quality of what we can remember. And what could be more fun than that? What could be more fun than that? The spirit purified in the fire, kindled by hearing, shines like gold, right? That's the 66th verse in, I believe it's the 66th verse in the Atma Bodha, right? So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. So Nads says, I constantly get lost and have no sense of direction. I feel like making memory palaces would be more difficult for someone like me. Are there people who have some kind of disability with spatial memory? Okay, well, before we ask about whether there are people who have a kind of disability with spatial memory, why would that be a disability, first of all? Why are we even thinking about the word disability yet? And then you feel like it's going to be more difficult for you. What do feelings matter? Have you created them? Just dive in. Don't let feelings be your guide. Let action be your guide. Let action be the thing that makes the decision for you. Because if you're just feeling it would be more difficult for you, well, then your feeling rules. But your experience is what you want to at least have a voice. So take action. Make the memory palaces. There's a free course at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. I'll pop that link in there for you. If you haven't taken it, don't overthink it. Just get out the PDFs and get out a pen and get out a pencil and start drawing memory palaces. And I'm serious. It is two barriers you're putting in front of yourself right now. Is that you feel it might be difficult for you, and you're using the word disability. This is not a path to success. None of those things are a path to success. You're like Ben Shapiro, he says, feelings, facts don't care about feelings, that sort of thing. And it's just a fact that any person can at least try to make the memory palaces. It's a fact. And I don't want to be insensitive about this, and please don't take it that way. But the fact is that the feelings are getting in the way, and they shouldn't. They should not be the boss of you getting the most out of your life and your memory. Now, are there some kind of people with a disability with space memory? Maybe. But why would it be a disability unless they either they encountered a negative human being who goes around calling things diseases that probably aren't diseases, or they self-invented it. Now, we have a huge problem in the world with this condition called aphantasia right now. And there's all kinds of people who are saying that not having a mind's eye is a problem and so on. And, I'm not saying that they're not having issues or suffering or whatever, but there's something very obvious about calling this a new disease or a new problem or a condition, and it's very, very pernicious that people with degrees are going around creating scientific explanations about, this thing of people not having a mind's eye, and then convincing them that, that they then have this issue, when it's not even that possible. If you haven't seen the live stream with Jared Guzans, it's spelled Gerard, but it's pronounced Jared. The guy has congenital blindness, and he is able to map spatially so much of the world. And what's so striking about that interview is he carries a mirror around with him. He's never seen himself in a mirror in his entire life, and he carries a mirror around with him. And the reason why, and this is a congenitally blind person who has summited Mount Everest. He's piloted planes, and he's run from Brisbane to Canberra, and is doing some multi-city run in Japan coming up soon. And he's an entrepreneur who owns businesses, right? And he carries a mirror around, and it's to remind him that what you put in is what you get out. So Nads, if you keep putting in words like that, what do you expect to get out? Put in other words. And by the way, I have in my life gotten lost and have had no sense of direction either. And the answer was learn how to read the sun, right? Learn a little bit about that. And the other answer was to learn just tackle it, right? Like if you have no sense of direction, start to think, well, what can I do to get a sense of direction, right? Don't fall into learned helplessness. Be your own enabler. You don't need anybody else to enable you. Just take action. And ask questions too. Good question. So you say, I have tried making memory palaces and it works, but I still have to ask directions every time I go outside in the city where I've lived for a long time. Can I improve that somehow? I don't know. I'd have to hear more about what is happening there. If it's causing you undue suffering, then, work on it. But is it really causing a problem to ask directions? And do you have to ask directions? It's, I don't personally like to use apps if I don't have to, but could you just use apps if asking people is an inconvenience? It shouldn't be. Ask them their name, memorize their name. have some small talk with them, chat with them, enjoy human contact, and that could be awesome. But if you wanted to work on it from a memory perspective, I would first rule out any medical stuff, and I can't give any medical advice or anything like that. But you could, if you, so you say you've created memory palaces and it works, right? So then you definitely don't want your feelings to get involved. You want or to, in a way that creates barrier. You want to use your feelings to help you create more memory palaces. Just make yourself a little mission. Um, on Collingwood and Fox Street, I recall there's a place called Stalled Espresso, right? And I went there and I looked, it was 35, 35 on Collingwood. I went there and I memorized the intersection. So use the memory techniques to memorize intersections and carve out a path and just, make it easy on yourself the first time. Carve out a path, memorize the streets in advance, pick a street, walk down it, and keep in mind what that next intersection should be. Reach it, and then pat yourself on the back. Bang presto, because you saw the street that you were supposed to see because you memorized it. And gradually memorize the location. So I think you could improve that way. But the question is this a high margin thing that's really going to improve life? If yes, do it. If not, then focus on memorizing the information that is high margin that's actually going to improve your life. This is just a classic thing. Memorize the stuff that improves your life and focus on the material inside of that that's going to improve it faster, right? So there's always like the potential to memorize thousands and thousands of pieces of information that'll improve your life, but then what's the 10% inside of that that's really going to improve your life, and then focus on that. And that's a good strategy. So Psycho Mistro says, yes, movement is fun. Fun is relative. Only the individual can decide for themselves how, when, and if it is fun. That is true, although I'm not sure that it is that individuals can decide for themselves, because we often find ourselves having fun without realizing it first, and then we change our story, right? So I don't think it's necessarily up to the individual. I think fun is a thing that can happen to us and surprise ourselves. We'd be like, oh, wow, this is fun, right? And because it's a chemical change that your conscious thinking has to catch up to, it may not be up to you. It may not be up to you. So that might be an important consideration. Michael Swain says, my response to fun would be that using memory palaces should be enriching, engaging, and or entertaining. Fun here akin to entertaining. Well, yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Michael says, if I'm not mildly entertained by the imagery I'm using, I need to step it up with my imagery. It should be engaging by that standard as well. But even then, it needs to be enriching. Those are great points. Great points. Thank you for that, Michael. Yeah, like there's something to that. And I think that's like another way of testing that it's concrete and not too abstract, if I'm understanding correctly. And then you suggest to Nads that I would also draw the path out, including the elements Anthony just mentioned. Yeah, drawing it out, yeah. I mean, I sort of assume that you would draw it out as part of the memory palace, in part or in whole. Nad says, great advice. I've just felt like I had to get better at it. Also, I'm learning physics at the moment, but I find it abstract. I don't want to just memorize the formulas. I want to remember the concepts. Great. Well, then, when you find it abstract, challenge this. What's so abstract about it? Put some physics in here. Let's de-abstract it. I don't really believe in abstractions. I think that abstractions, when people say it's abstract, I think that what they're doing is they're actually saying, I haven't tried to understand this, by connecting it using memory techniques that make it concrete and immediate and real and enriching and engaging, as Michael is here, and entertaining. So the 3 E's: enriching, engaging, entertaining, right? And so a lot of people, they just, abstract, and then they let it go and leave it in, this is frustrating, don't want to deal with it world. When really you got to switch on that part inside of yourself, the puzzle solver, right? The chess master who's going to outwit the opponent information, and you're going to get yourself ahead of it, and you're going to figure it out. So I don't know what abstract means, but just make it concrete, and give an example. What's abstract? Like justice. Justice, yeah, it's abstract, but we can start to figure it out. Like justice when? Justice where? Justice meted out by whom? Right? And then we start to think, okay, so, in the Greek system, Plato, justice was part of the good, and, it was this eternal essence and all this sort of stuff. And so now what are we going to do with eternal essence? So essence, what the heck? Maybe we think of some perfume, right? I don't know. Like that's already easier when we think of an association. And then we think of the good. Okay, the concept of the good, kind of abstract, but where did he mean? Is he talking about heaven? Well, okay, so then how are we going to get the good up in heaven? And so on and so on. Just start to associate. With physics, Michael says, you can de-abstractify with models. One of the beauties of the sciences is that experimentational models are plentiful. Yes, yes. Well, back to this book here, Requisite Organization. I mean, it's just filled with all kinds of stuff, right? All kinds of goofy drawings and stuff. And I don't ever look at something and go, oh man, that's abstract. I just start to look at it, and like it's got MRG sub leadership. Right? And the issue of personal effectiveness appraisal brings together all of the major features of the MAH, right? And it's just like I can treat that as being like really heavy duty and abstract, and or I can just say, wow, this guy is using some pretty highfalutin language structures, and oh man, what a crazy diagram. And I just mentally change my attitude and shift and like get to start to get really detailed and be like really interested in like this, like the minutia of this. So it is really, really just a simple switch in attitude that you can make at any time. Just got to catch yourself in the moment. So Nad says, in biology, I turn the materials into stories like molecules to characters that live in an environment. Perfect. So why can't you do that with physics? It's too bad Adolfo is not here because he's doing medical physics. So he's got both of those things. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And we'll now jam on a couple more mailbag things here. Well, that's someone sharing their magnetic imagery. It all sounds good. Those are questions for the dojo. And let's see here. So someone is asking if they should use every possible station in their memory palace. And the answer is it depends. I mean, every possible station, what does that mean? Generally, just use as many as you need based on your level of skill with managing multiple stations, and make sure that you're not overwhelming yourself, and that you don't create so much to manage that you can't actually do the memory techniques, or else the evil Dr. Forget will show up. And he'll melt all that knowledge like snow. So don't overdo it. Just try to find that sweet spot and balance the memory palace so that it actually works for the volume of information that you need. So Nad says, I don't see natural characters in physics. I guess I need to get creative. Yeah, just ask yourself. I mean, here's one of the things that you can do is like this process of self-inquiry. So I'm able to turn materials into stories. I can turn molecules into characters. Well, why can't I do this in physics? Like, what is it there? Do you need to get creative, or do you need to just think about some other aspect? Like, is there some attitude you have about physics? I had an email from a guy the other day. He's like, yeah, my daughter speaks Chinese and she speaks this, that, and the other thing, and somehow she can't get into Spanish, right? And well, is it that there's a problem with her, or like, is Spanish really more difficult than Chinese, which I doubt? Or maybe there's just Maybe there's something inside that needs to be tackled. Um, so you got to kind of look inside yourself, and sometimes it doesn't have to do with your process or necessarily anything that you're doing. It might have to do with a deep issue between yourself and the information that needs resolving. Whatever that may be, I don't know, but shouldn't be that difficult if you just keep experimenting and maybe throw some mind mapping into the mix. All right. So let's see if we get some more mailbag. If you have any questions, pop them in or anything you want to say. And we'll see if we can grab up a couple more mailbag questions here. Man, I sure get a lot of crazy emails sometimes. So, Irina says, I forget appointments and I leave doors open until my wife points it out. All right, well, one of the things to do is to create some better behaviors around your calendar. This is one of those things that I used to rely a lot on a mnemonic calendar, and hanging out with Jonathan Levy, he was just like, man, if you don't have to memorize it and the technology can handle it for you, then let it do it, right? And it's a yes and no kind of thing, but I went along with it, and now I just sort of like half use my mnemonic calendar, and I do allow notifications to remind me, and it's just more efficient in some sense. And also, we now just have like automated calendars, so when people book appointments with me, they just get a link, and then the link takes care of the notifications and so forth. So yes, it's a missed opportunity for some brain exercise and using a mnemonic calendar, but at the same time, then there's more time and space for memorizing Sanskrit that I'm working on right now, right? So that's very nice about that. But you may also just need the brain exercise if you're forgetting appointments that badly. So it makes sense to do a little bit of both. Uh, it's really, really easy to get some of that going on both ends. And in terms of leaving doors open and so forth, so is that a problem for you or for your wife? I mean, if your wife is barking at you about it, then maybe, I don't know, you need to just say, I will do my best to remember. I'm working on it, but in the meantime, relax. It's just the door. Unless, it's letting in all kinds of bugs or pirates or I don't know what. But the first thing is like sometimes the things you're doing are a problem for someone else and they have the attitude problem. So you got to just kind of like point them out and say, look, yeah, I recognize that's bothering you. I'll try to do something about it, but relax. Um, and sometimes you just got to say, no, I actually leave the door open because I like the door. I like the fresh air or whatever. And just, talk to each other and don't allow someone to bark at you or yell at you. If that's what's happening. I don't know. And it might not be a memory issue. I don't know. But in any case, if you wanted to remember the door needs to be open and you keep forgetting it, like I don't know that mnemonics or memory techniques have a role to play here. But it could be as simple as, putting a sign on the door that just says, remember to close the door. Or you could maybe you see Ronald McDonald with a giant stop sign, and you start off with having an image of this on the door, and then you make a model of it in your mind as a mnemonic, and then until, after you get it, after a while, you take it away, and you then just keep applying that image while you see the door. So there's the Ronald McDonald with the thing. Oh yeah, there he is again. I'll close the door. But give it a try. But check to make sure that someone's not just bossing you around. in an uncouth and unnecessary way. So Psycho Vivek is here. Hello, Vivek. Thanks for saying hello. Parth is here. Thank you, Parth, for saying hello. Psycho Mistro. This may be a bit off topic, but how can you forget or stop reliving something? Yeah, well, I've been there. I've been there. There's different ways. It depends on what it is. Um, so I remember one time driving down to Rome, and heartbroken. My roommate was driving at that particular stretch. We shared the driving, but he was driving along. We're on the way to Rome, and I'm just like, I can't get her out of my head and all this sort of stuff. So what I did is I put a line across a piece of paper, and then I put a line down the center, and it was like the pros of that relationship and the cons of that relationship. And just thinking pro, con, 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 pro, con, 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 pro, con, 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 con. Like, it's just like so obvious. And then what I did is I just allowed myself to really just enjoy those pros, not try to chase them away, but just enjoy it and just acknowledge that, there was a lot of problems there, but this is a human being. It's just amazing, amazing opportunity to spend so much time with one single person. And we traveled all over the place. We were all over Europe. And that's part of the pain, right? Because they're so deeply integrated inside of you. They're in your chemical mix. As I was talking about earlier, when you commit things to memory based on things you already have in your memory, which was the purpose of this exercise, is to find more about how you could use the method of Loci by getting more intimate with the mental content that's already there. Well, when you're with a person, it's the same thing. They're in your chemistry. They're literally encoded in your brain, in the chemical brain, and they always will be because it's a chemical change that's very, very deep. So then you've got to start to change the chemicals yourself. And one of the best ways to do is just embrace all that good, embrace all that love in this case. And just find the good in it. Find the good in it. And then say, thank heavens all that bad stuff is over. Because I'm just going to focus on the good memories and be really super grateful that I got to have so many awesome experiences with that person. Now, I don't know what you're thinking of, Psycho Mistro, but if you want to share in more detail, then maybe we can work on it. But like another thing that happened to me was having to go to the hospital and being in the hospital for like 3 months, and they wouldn't let me out of there. And yeah, I can really, really just focus on what a nightmare situation that was. Or I can think things like, well, that doctor, he sure had a good imagination, and he was very tall, and start to like mine the good stuff that was there, and then think, oh yeah, I remember my friend Adam visited me a lot. That was very nice of him, and he used to like make it fun and lighthearted by sitting on top of the piano and making jokes about the other patients and their plight, and then I can think about the all the books that I dragged into there because I always need to have books around me and so on, and just focus on the good stuff. And then I think about the surroundings because I got to be able to leave the hospital from time to time in the 3 months that I was there, and there was this library across the street that had these griffin statues. And I can just focus on all that cool stuff, right? And then I've never used that library across the street as a memory palace. I don't want to use this hospital as a memory palace. I made a video about it a long time ago on YouTube about why that I don't want to use that as a memory palace. So you can go watch that if you want. But I never really, have used the library across the street. But wow, what a great library. And I have such a clear image of it because I was in there and dragged a whole bunch of books out of there across to the hospital. Yeah, so, just I'm sure that in everything that is really bad that you're replaying in your mind, there's stuff surrounding it that you can really focus on and bring your love to, bring your joy to, that will burn out all the bad stuff or at least make it more palatable. And then maybe you repeat it still for a while, but it's just a little less of a sting. Hope that answers your question, Psycho Mistro. But running doesn't help. Trying to evade it probably is never going to help. Trying to distract it It's probably never going to help. I mean, Freud got a lot of things wrong. There's a lot of controversy and so forth. But one thing that he's definitely right about is that whatever we repress returns. And when it returns as a monster. So I'd say bring some familiarity into it and just bring some love to it. And I don't mean love in like some wishy-washy, goofy way. Don't pretend, but find some real, genuine love. And the other thing too is just to work on yourself. Work on loving yourself. You're the only person that exists anyway, and I mean that in the real tangible sense. If you really test it, you are the only one who's you, right? No one else is you. And all the other people exist inside of the chemical bath in your head, right? They exist in the world. I'm not saying they don't exist, but for all intents and purposes, you are the real deal, right? And the more you focus on fixing you, because you can't fix anyone else, because you're not in their head, right? The more things become real cool and blissful and awesome. But the trick in it is you got to let go of the outcome. You can't try to control what happens out of the activities that you do because nobody has control over them. I don't know what you guys think about free will, but like it's pretty obvious that there's no free will in any sense of the term. But by the same token, we are cursed to take action. And somehow, even though there's no free will, we can still take action somehow through a process of listening and realizing the truth that this is all there is. This is all that we have to work with. We are really the only people we're ever going to be. And we're in the fullness of that right in this moment. And all we need to do is then start to ask very simple questions. And the questions are great. Like, how are my thoughts behaving? Are they useful? And then what would be more useful right now, and start to shift to more useful thoughts. So that's in the Ribhu Gita. And there's many things. The way that Gary Weber frames these ancient passages into questions of just like, are my thoughts useful? How do they behave? Are they useful? And just how unreal are these thoughts? Well, they're 100% unreal because as soon as you have them, they're gone. And you can never have the same thought again, right? Because even if you had it again, you're having it in a different position in time in that moment. So really start to investigate the self, because the self is everything, because you are trapped in your chemical bath. And that's not a bad thing. That's a beautiful thing. And then you can really work with it. You can really work with it and absolutely expand your, I don't know what you want to call it, but expand your consciousness through memory training. Because the more cool things you memorize, especially when they're cool Sanskrit phrases, for example, that train you to ask these questions, that sharpen your mind to focus on how your mind is behaving, so you can escape the traps that those thought patterns lead you into, then everything just gets better and better. And we know from books like How Enlightenment Changes Your Brain that doing this actually changes the structure of your brain. And like I go around most of the day feeling as high as a kite, because these things that I do, they have actually changed my brain so that it's just producing, I guess, more dopamine. I went to the doctor and said, how much is it going to cost to get a brain scan to confirm that my brain looks like the brain on this page, and that I'm not just deluding myself, right? Because there's an actual way that the brain changes shape if you do all this stuff. And I'm doing like times 10 what this book talks about just to get these benefits, because I'm going heavy duty with memorizing all this stuff. More from Evolving Beyond Thought with the Ribhu Gita, but I started with the Upadesa Saram because, just add a little bit more. Why not? But I want to confirm it. Like, I'd love to get the brain scan. So we'll get it done eventually. But you just feel it. You just feel it. And it's like it just switches on. And life gets better and better and better and better. And there's like this cruising altitude that's just unbelievable. And then this turbulence comes, but you feel the turbulence less and less. And if you saw a video I made not too many months ago, I talked about like the best depression I ever had, because I did go into this depression, but it was so temporary, and it was the weirdest depression I ever had, because even though I felt like crap and like all the old depression stuff was there, I had this glowing anyway, and I was able to deal with it in ways that were better than any depression I ever had. And it was just like thought was the pill, because in the past in my life, like you get depression, well, you start taking the pills. Like I used to drink, get rid of that depression, and then of course you get rid of it temporarily, and then the next thing you do, you wake up all hungover, and then you get even worse depression, right? It's a terrible, terrible thing. But this stuff is better, way better. It just works. So I hope that helps you stop reliving something. Just train your brain, and you will stop reliving it. And one of the most powerful things, it's the first thing that I memorized from the Upadesa Saram, is just that the universe is governed by laws. You can't control those laws, so why do you worry about the outcomes of things, right? And if you just focus on that and repeat it, I've probably repeated it 500 times now or whatever, you start to see the logic in it, and you start to let go of the outcome of things. And then the next one says that like every action that you take goes into the vast ocean of energy that creates more actions. So I guess the suggestion there is that if you can take fewer actions, you create fewer actions that you are then forced to contend with, because energy put into the system creates a return. So, you know, given that the laws of the universe behave according to a logic that you don't control, and you need to let go of the outcome, to what extent can you actually only take the actions that are creating the outcomes that you actually want? So it's basically game theory. It's ancient game theory. Play the games, and only those games that you want to be invited to play again. Nietzsche had this idea of the myth of the eternal return, it's called. And basically the question is, if you had to wake up every day forced to repeat the same day again and again and again, and you knew that today was the day that you were going to be forced to live again and again and again, how would you live that day? And once you know that answer, live that day that way, so that should you be cursed to live it over and over and over again, you would do it cheerfully. Cheerfully. And the thing about that mental riddle, that puzzle, is this. That's what's happening to you anyway. Like every day you wake up, every day you eat some stuff, every day you drink some stuff, every night you go to sleep, and then you wake up and you do it all over again, right? And the problem is that a lot of people are filling in between the peeing and the pooing and the drinking and the sleeping and the snoring and the picking your nose and, you know, all that stuff that you got to do. They're filling it with a bunch of crap that they don't actually want to do, right? And then they wonder why they're not happy. They wonder why they can't remember stuff. They wonder why. And it's just because they are cursing themselves to repeat miserable conditions that they hate again and again and again, because they're chasing after outcomes that they can't possibly have any control over, because we don't control the laws of the universe. We just don't. So build a better game. And it starts right here in your chemical bath. So the John Coyle is here. Hello, John. Thanks for saying hello. He says, hi, Anthony. I just tuned in from the UK. I love your work. Can you talk about a creativity exercise to get the brain warmed up for mind mapping? Good question. Let me revert here to Michael, who says, if I were to comment on that, I'd say meditation and maybe some card memorization. I do this before I do memory work, and it's fantastic. Yeah. Great stuff. And the John continues, I could be wrong, but I'm sure Anthony has previously talked about a creativity exercise using the mind map itself as a tool. I've talked about the mind map as the tool for being more creative, but Michael's things are great as well. But the idea really is to have that central image, right? Which is the creative exercise that you may have heard before. It's the exercise inside of the exercise. So this is a way of getting yourself warmed up. And I've speculated before, which you may have heard on a podcast, that the reason why Tony mentions that you should have 3 colors is because that's a little micro creative exercise to warm yourself up. So consider that. I think that's probably what you picked up before. So the beauty of mind mapping, as Buzan teaches it, the genius in it of it is that it has a creative warm up exercise from the get go if you're doing it correctly, or according to that. And I don't think that that's just like I used to think some of the things that he was talking about was just like, yeah, whatever, right? Some crazy thing to write in books, or I just like, some of us, we just have our attitudes when we encounter things and we don't quite see the logic of it. But then I go and I meet him and him and Phil Chambers, and I was just like, oh yeah, okay. And then I did it with them, and I see it, and then I reread the book, and then I read another new book, this one, Mind Map Mastery, and it's like, yeah, that all makes sense. And then you just cumulatively fill your brain with new knowledge, and you read books like How Enlightenment Changes Your Brain. You're like, holy cow, I bet you Tony Buzan's enlightened, because wow, that's some next level stuff. But you never do it. You never understand it till you feel it. But anyway, that's what I was talking about. I'm pretty sure is what you mean. All right, so Psycho Mistro says, thanks for the insight on that question. It definitely helped. Great. 100%. If you're new here, get subscribed to this channel. If you haven't hit the thumbs up yet, do so now, and let me know where you are in the world if you're just joining us. Dr. Sohail says, nothing works with me. May you be blessed with super sharp memory. Well, great. I don't recommend waiting for blessings to fall from the sky. I don't know what you did when you say nothing works. What have you done? What is nothing? And how do you know that it didn't work? That's the thing, right? It's because when we're learning something, sometimes we need multiple teachers. Sometimes we need to read multiple books. Sometimes we need to come at it because what we tried on Monday might not work on Monday because we didn't have enough coffee, or we got off on the wrong side of the bed or whatever. It has nothing to do with the technique. It has to do with the conditions of the day. So try it again and try to learn it from a different perspective. It's not about anything working for you. It's about how you work the techniques. And it has a lot of things. It has to do with strategy. It has to do with the right teacher who gels with your learning style. It has to do with your learning preferences. It has to do with your hierarchies of consumption. It has to do with all kinds of things that you got to get right sometimes. And you do that by repeatedly picking at it, coming at it from a different angle. Be theatrical about it, Drama. Life is drama. One of the things that you need to understand, really, or you can learn from watching a lot of movies and learning narratology and drama theory and all that sort of stuff, is that every character has to want something, right? And Kurt Vonnegut always said every character has to want something, even if it's just a glass of water. They shouldn't be in a scene unless they want something. And so a lot of people, they actually don't even really know what they want, right? They're just floating around aimlessly. They're not. They're really not in the world, they just, whatever. They need to think about wanting something that's real, that they really want, and then go out and get it. So when people say that memory techniques didn't work for them, it's often because they don't have a want at the other end. Yeah, I just wish I had a better memory. But a better memory for what, right? Yeah, well, maybe a language. Like, which language, right? And then why? And then they'll pick a language they don't really want to learn. So pick the one that you do want to learn, or pick something that will improve your life, and then work backwards. What are the memory techniques that are going to help me get that information in my brain? And then find out what those are, and then learn them and use them and practice them with the information that will improve your life. Things will go a lot faster, very, very quickly. So Nad says, what books do you recommend for young women? I really like the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. What books do you guys in the chat recommend? Okay, well, I don't know what it is about young women that you are thinking about. So what is it that a young woman is seeking? That would be interesting, and maybe I can give you some book recommendations. Because I'm not currently a young woman. I don't expect to be one in the future. And the young women that I have known have been voracious readers of a wide variety of content that is beyond the name and form of gender preference. So Tell me more about what you're looking for. Oh, you're a young woman is what you meant. Okay. Um, so I'm still not sure what that has to do with anything. So what books about what? I mean, congratulations on being a young woman. That's great. But I mean, and I don't mean to say that I don't understand what that has to do with anything in some in some derogatory sense. But I just mean like, what kinds of books are you looking for? Like more books like the Cal Newport that have to do with things like that, or what? Because we got 1,001 books around here, and just need to know some more direction in terms of genre, and then maybe we can come up with something. Generally, when you're not getting an answer, it's because your question isn't specific enough in the world. So the John Coyle says, I believe it involved picking up something you can see in the room. You put that as the central image. You then use a dictionary to choose 10 words at random and place them around the central image. Well, the John Coyle, if you can find me talking about that, I will have an amazing experience of remembering. Are you sure it was me? If it was, I love that. I love when I don't remember doing something and let me know. But that doesn't sound like anything that I've talked about. Uh, but it could be. It could be. I've written a lot of things. I'd love to be surprised by myself. Pick up a dictionary and then choose 10 words at random and place them around the central image. Yeah. What can I say? But it sounds like you have more than enough material to actually use that as a technique without any need for review. Maybe in the old Magnetic Mary Method newsletter I talked about that. That can be. Maybe I've even done it and just don't remember. Wouldn't that be odd? Nad says, I'm a young woman, is what I meant. Okay, a book on science and the brain then. So, a book on science and the brain. I would recommend The Case for Mental Imagery by Stephen Kosslyn. So, read that. And then I would read How Enlightenment Changes Your Brain. I'm curious now about picking up an object and then mind mapping it. Now it does sound like something that I probably said and did in some of my experiments. In any case, I don't know. This is the interesting thing about memory is that one of the things we do to ourselves or that can happen to us is that these things come in and then we start to imagine and then we may wind up actually thinking that we did something that we didn't because of how it came into our mind. So have you ever seen the memory studies where a young woman is brought into a room and she's told, or what you had an argument with your boyfriend on the lawn the other day and the police were called. And she's like, and the parents are in on the experiment. And she's like, no, I didn't. My boyfriend and I, we were just on the lawn. Like we didn't have an argument and the police weren't called. No, not at all. We've never fought. We've never had this. And the person's quite insistent about that never having happened. And the researcher says, well, no, your parents, like they have the footage and they were filming it and we saw it ourselves. You were arguing with your boyfriend and the police showed up. And then what ends up happening is that they bring her back a couple of weeks later or a certain period of time. And then they say, do you remember anything further about that incident? And the subject will sit there and say, yeah, I was thinking about it. And I do remember something about the police, and it's implanting memories. So it's something to think about. So if in the future you're ever like, oh yeah, that great idea I had about picking up objects in the room, remember? Yeah. Like I may actually think that I have actually come up with this exercise if I'm not the one who did. So it's a lost memory, and weird if I have forgotten doing something that intense, but not unheard of, and definitely weird if I didn't do it and then somehow I think in the future that I did, but perfectly in keeping with the weird things that your memory can do to you. So I'm almost like raising this memory experiment where people are convinced that they had altercations with the police that they never had by putting a little hex there just in case. But I'd love to see if you can find that and that it truly was from me, because it does sound like one of the experiments that I would have run at a time. But we would want to definitely confirm that if it can be found. All right. So, Nads, I hope that that's a good two brain science book recommendations for you. I recommend another one for you, which is called Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. It's got a lot of scientific references in it, but it's a little bit more broader than science. But I think you'll find it very, very useful. And speaking of rest, this has been a great time today. Thanks, everybody, for such a wonderful, wonderful chat. I had a lot of fun, as I always do, and really, really appreciate all these wonderful things. And I hope that you will go and memorize some information on all these memory palaces that you know how to unpack now by using this wonderful process of mind mapping. If you don't have Mind Map Mastery, highly, highly recommend it. Also, the top tips from Phil Chambers, 101 Top Tips for Better Mind Mapping, I believe is the title. Let me look that up. I never memorized the actual title, but you really need to check it out. And by the way, if you're here right now and you haven't seen the review that I wrote and podcasted about Mind Map Mastery, please check it out, share it around, and register for the free course while you're there if you haven't already. For better mind mapping. I'm pretty sure it's 101 top tips for better mind maps. There you go. Great. Michael says, thanks, Anthony. Good to be here. And I think the Cosmos looks pretty awesome. Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad you find it good. And I really had a lot of fun playing around with this stuff. But, boo, it's too hot in here. I think we're going back to the porch for the summer. But thanks for being here, for all your wonderful contributions. And hope to see you again soon. And yeah, let me see. Also, while we're sharing some last little links here, check out that mind map book review. But also, this week's episode of the Magnetic Memory Method podcast is with 2018 USA Memory Champion John Graham. And man, that is a doozy. He's so incredible. So make sure you check that out. Click those share buttons. Leave a comment on the page. And I really, really enjoyed learning from him. And I know that you will too. And so, let's see here. That's about it for me today. And we'll be back in the near future with another live stream for you all out there in the world. And oh, it's 4 a.m., Michael. Man, yeah, check out. It's 9 p.m. in Brisbane right now. And I don't normally do these afternoon, evening sessions, but I like to do them sometimes when I can. Oh, Reclaiming Life. Good morning. Good morning. Well, don't often do this time, but was glad to do it and glad to see you, if only briefly. But I think the replay will be reasonable, even though this is not showing up quite right. But we'll figure out if we can make it better next time. But I think I got all the links that I wanted to share with you all. Definitely listen to that episode with John Graham. And, you know, you'll want to be on his email list because he sends out some incredible stuff. And really, there's only 2 other email lists that I've recommended in my career that I can think of, at least in this context of memory. And that is James Clear, and John Graham. And so don't miss out, because I don't recommend being on email lists very often. And I don't make the recommendation lightly, because, email is a wonderful thing. But it takes a certain time and energy, but it's an art and a craft and a science, and some people just do it better than others. And I've learned a lot from James Clear's and John Graham's. So that podcast episode, I'm sure you will enjoy, with John Graham. Really, really great conversation, and epic and inspiring. It will help you if you've ever struggled to just take action and get your memory training in on a day-to-day basis. So, you like that, eh? Psychomistro? Yeah, I like it too. It's just too bad the yellow isn't showing up. What is with this green screen behind me somehow making the yellow disappear? Weird, but I like the Batman cup too. And I also got to say a shout out to Julie. I don't know if she'll watch the replay, but she sent me this one, which is always be yourself. Unless you can be Batman, then always be Batman. And that's wonderful. Cheers, says tea time for the live stream. Well, cheers to you as well. That was Perth you said you were at, right? Yeah. Have a good time out there. Not too far away from here, although pretty far away, actually. Big country. John says, thank you. You're a star. Well, you're a star too, John. And I hope that we can see you again in the near future, and see you all again in the near future. Reclaiming Life says, you need to be careful not to obsess on email, something that's easier for me since I don't run an online business. Much respect for your digital fasting. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, it is a thing. Like, if you're going to do it, you got to study it. You got to read a lot of it to understand how it works, its logic, its rhythms. And, well, the other thing is that I do a lot of digital fasting, though. And now with writing the new book, it's beautiful because I won't get into it now, but the book writing process gives me more digital fasting than any other time, really. And I absolutely love it. I love being in the library. I love to write in libraries. And this new book, I think you're going to really love, because it connects to some of those bigger questions that a lot of people ask on the live streams, but still has the nitty gritty of the memory techniques and what you can do. And that's going to be the biggest part. So Reclaiming Life says, will your new book do you touch on writing meditation? Yes, that's a whole section. So the new book is on bringing meditation and memory techniques together so that you're doing them in the same swift blow. I haven't released the title yet. I think I have the title, although I thought of an alternative one that's pretty good. And it is going to include writing meditation. It's going to include as many meditations that I know and have practiced, which is quite a few. And the focus is on bringing memory techniques into the mix so that you are doing both at the same time, but ultimately seeing that if you change your perspective, you're going to understand that using memory techniques, at least the way I teach them, is always meditation. It always is meditation. And if you can just get to the level where you do some of the chemical changes to your brain, like as taught here, or rather not taught there, but I mean, there's some exercises in there. They're pretty low grade exercises, but good ones. You'll see that once you get to the other side of the chemical changes, then you'll realize you were never that far from the other side at all. So John asks, do I know much about Vipassana meditation? Well, yes and no. I know like the basics, but I don't see that as, well, basically, let me put it this way. There are meditations that will put you in the prison you're trying to escape, and there are meditations that will show you the prison that you never had to escape at all. And one of the things that I've discovered in my research and I have to figure out how to evade the trap myself, is that the best speakers on this often like speak in such gobbledygook about things that should be so easy and obvious to explain. But then as soon as you open your mouth, it's almost like something has cast a spell that causes you to just like suddenly sound like a weirdo, wacko moron, and you just can't like put your sentences together. So I really like this book because it's very clear and like obviously has some heavy duty, highfalutin editors behind it to like really make it good. But at the same time, they're not into like the heavy duty techniques. And then one of the things is like, what do you need to do these heavy duty techniques for? So one of the better writers that I found on this is James Swartz. And so I'm reading right now I finished the Yoga of the Three Energies. Now I'm reading the Yoga of Love. And like he's really good at making some of the heavy duty, highfalutin concepts more clear. But then he has like these super intense diagrams, and then you're like, did I understand this or did I not? But once you get the big picture and then you have the change, there's no changing back because it's that deep, it's that chemical. And the name of the game is that you've got to just realize that you are what they're calling pure consciousness. Now it turns out it's more technical than pure consciousness. There's like two kinds of pure consciousness, whatever. Whatever, but also awesome, right? Because if you read this stuff, it's all really interesting. And there's this Sanskrit technical verbiage or terminology, and it's really, really interesting to get into it and start to think about it. And then one of the points that James Swartz makes is that it's all words, right? It's all about words. And there's something really profound about that because we put words into our chemical structures of our brains. And then the words we choose and how we use them actually change the chemicals. So the more you focus on the right kinds of words and the right formulations, the more you're changing your chemicals in the right way. It's just like, how do you get started, right? How do you convince yourself that you're the only self who can do it? And the sooner you get it done, the better that you can enjoy this wild ride that we're on and enjoy it consistently no matter what happens because you've let go of the outcome. So Reclaiming Life says, I've just started writing meditation, practiced it at random on my own before knowing other people also practice it. I thought I had found something new at first. Oh yeah, no, writing meditation is a big deal. I've taught it for years in the Self-Improvement Supercharger program. And this is why memory journaling I teach again and again and again. It's because it is meditating. The shift is in thinking about it as meditation and then understanding the role of meditation in being free, so to speak. So How Enlightenment Changes Your Brain is the title of this book. Andrew Newberg, and the title of this one, Mark Robert Waldman is the co-author of How Enlightenment Changes Your Brain. This is the Yoga of the Three Energies by James Swartz, and I'm not sure this is the book to start with. The one to start with him, maybe, I don't know. You can start anywhere, but might be The Essence of Enlightenment. That one's quite good. And then he does a commentary on the Panchadasi, which is like really heavy. So I don't know, maybe it depends where you're at. But this other book is Happiness Beyond Thought, and highly, highly recommend that. And that's where I'm starting to memorize the Upadesa Saram, which is very, very powerful. And the other ones I showed earlier before you got here are Maps of Meaning by Jordan B. Peterson, Mind Map Mastery by Tony Buzan. We also today featured Requisite Organization, and thanks again to Alexander for recommending that to me. And speaking of books with heavy-duty terminology, and then 12 Rules for Life. So great, great stuff. And as usual, I'm reading like a fish, swims in water, and loving every single word that comes into my brain. And the current James Swartz book I'm reading right now is called The Yoga of Love, but I don't have it right here. But one of the things that he's talking about there is like the real technical stuff behind, devotion, bhakti. And so on the note of bhakti and devotion, one of the things that we do is we always show our respect and kindness and devotion to our teachers. And a lot of today has been to show what I've learned from Tony Buzan and help pass it forward and demonstrate some mind mapping stuff for y'all. And I hope that you were able to benefit from it, and I hope that you will mind map, and you will mind map the method of Loci or Loci or Loci or Loci again and again and again and again, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, for life, for a habit that you never stop enjoying, because you get deeper and deeper and deeper into the space inside of you and all that it can do for you to help you integrate with the information that you don't know. Because this paper was blank when we started, and that's what every moment is like, in some sense, in terms of capturing new information and putting it into color in your mind so that it has a place to go. And the more you enable yourself to do that, the more information comes in and you can grab it. And you can grab it and hold on to it and weave it into the space of your mind so that you have more mental tools to remember more things in the next moment. And that's a very, very beautiful thing. And so I am very grateful to the teachers that have helped me along the way. And I'm grateful for all the teachers who are yet to come. And may many come. And you are all teachers too, even if you don't sometimes realize it, because one of the things that you can understand is that the lessons are everywhere. And if you're just open to it, you're getting more information about what to do, when to do it, and how to do it than you are ever aware of if you're not paying attention to the world. And so memory training can help you pay way more attention. And so this is the project I'm working on in the new book, is help you see that and give you practices that will help you see that. And as insofar as it's actually possible to say, try this one first and then do this one and progressively go through it, I will give you those suggestions. So you can potentially skip to the head of the line. But the problem is that I don't actually know, so I need to do it in two ways, which is the way I did it as a kind of story, and then the way that I would do it again if I had to do it all over again. So we'll see. Books are not written overnight, but I try to do 2,000 words a day, every day, and I usually do about 4,000. So we shall see how long this one takes. I predict about 6 weeks. So then the development stage after that, who knows? We let ourselves take a break after the draft is done and, see what happens after that. But it's going to be, it's a fun thing. It's a fun thing to write this book. And so without further ado, thanks everybody for today. And really great to see you all. Thanks for all the wonderful participation. Come visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com. And if you were new here, make sure you've hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up. And if you're watching the replay, then throw in a chat down in the discussion below. Reclaiming Life is saying everyone is someone you can learn from, whether they're a prisoner on death row, a baby in a cradle, or someone with multiple PhDs. Yes, absolutely. And even from the PhDs, because sometimes I always like to think of PhD as piled higher and deeper, because that's somehow the way it seems. But it depends what's in the pile. With that, thanks everybody. Really appreciated seeing you all here today. And until we have a chance to speak again, come visit me at Magnetic Memory Method and keep yourself magnetic. Bye-bye.